It is my honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Catherine Ford Corrigan. Dr. Catherine Corrigan is the President and Chief Executive Officer at Exponent, a publicly traded global engineering and scientific consulting firm. Exponent's interdisciplinary organization of scientists, physicians, engineers, and business consultants draws from over 90 technical disciplines to solve the most pressing and complicated challenges facing stakeholders today. The firm leverages over 50 years of experience in analyzing accidents and failures to advise clients as they innovate their technologically complex products, processes, and ensures the safety and health of their users while addressing the challenges of sustainability. Dr. Corrigan joined the company in 1996, was promoted to principal in the Biomechanics Practice in 2002, and to corporate vice president in 2005. In 2012, she was appointed vice president of Exponent's Transportation Group, overseeing the company's vehicle engineering, biomechanics, human factors, and statistical and data science practices, as well as visual communications. She was then appointed president of the company in 2016 and chief executive officer in 2018, and has also served on Exponent's board of directors since 2018. Dr. Corrigan has been a nationally recognized consultant in the area of injury biomechanics and motor vehicle and product safety for more than 25 years. Dr. Corrigan holds a Ph.D. in medical engineering from MIT through the Harvard MIT Division of Health Sciences and Technology, and an MS in mechanical engineering from MIT, and a B.S. in bioengineering from the University of Pennsylvania. She was elected to the National Academy of Engineering in 2021. Dr. Corrigan was also recognized in 2019 by San Francisco Business Times on their list of most influential women in Bay Area business. And she was also on the list of the most influential corporate board directors as well. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Corrigan.
How's the sound? Can you hear me? Good in the back? Okay. I like to not stand behind the podium. I hope that you can all see me okay. So thank you, Justine, for that wonderful introduction. And I am just thrilled beyond imagining to be in a room full of three-dimensional people giving this talk. So I will echo the comments already being made by Kathleen and others. It is just fantastic. You've all braved whatever you've braved to get here as well. So I appreciate your commitment. You know, today what I'm going to do is really reflect on a 25-year journey, even longer than 25 years, actually. I'm going to take you way back to the beginning. But I want to share this journey with you today, and I hope that you will find some areas of resonance for yourself. There are many different paths that people take. It can be a very nonlinear path, but you know, I had just an incredible time putting this together for all of you. As a CEO of a public company, I don't often get an opportunity to just sit and reflect on my journey. And so I thank you and the program committee for giving me the opportunity to do that. So we are going to have to figure out how to advance the slides. This is the technology. That's okay. There we go. Oh, now it's working. It just needed to wake up a little bit. This is why the name of my company used to be Failure Analysis Associates. So this is like a little test. So I'll take you back really to the very early days. Please indulge me for a couple of minutes. I'm the cute little one with the devious look on her face on the left. This is circa, I don't know, maybe 1970 or 1969. And that's my sister Beverly sitting next to me. But there were many influences, you know, that my family had on me back in the early days. My father is an electrical engineer. He has a Ph.D. from Cornell. And he was a very strong influence in my life. You know, he worked at Bell Laboratories. Some of you may have heard of that. So I was a Bell Labs kid. And so engineering was a thing in our house. You know, it was very much a thing in our house. My mother, she had a degree in psychology. She married young, and like most women of her generation, when my sister was born, she stopped her working. She had been teaching to raise us. But when I was in middle school, junior high school, she decided that she wanted to go back to school. And she had to start with algebra, but she wanted to get her degree in computer science. She was my first woman in STEM role model, and I didn't know it at the time. And it was really only in reflecting back and preparing this talk that I really recognized that role that she had in my life. I remember the days my father was so supportive of her, helping her with her math. And this was back in the days when tech wasn't even called tech. You know, you had a stack of punch cards that you had to feed into the computer. It was assembly language, Fortran, you know, computer languages that you all maybe have read about, but would never, ever have used. And she persevered and she got her degree. And my father got to retire and she got to bring home the bacon for another 10 years as a computer network manager, right? So she was just an incredible role model for me as well in terms of what you can achieve if you set your mind to it. So, you know, and I was also realizing how fortunate I was for not only the high expectations that my parents set for both my sister and me, but also the fact that those expectations were gender blind. Here I am, that's me at maybe around 1980. I'm probably about 12 years old, and I'm on the tractor and I'm mowing the lawn. You know, the lawn needs to be mowed. You're gonna learn how to mow it, right? You're gonna change the oil in the car. You're gonna vacuum the pool. You know, there were no different expectations because we were girls. And I think we were very fortunate to have that kind of influence in our lives. So my educational journey, you know, I was surrounded by engineering as I was growing up, but I was always fascinated by the human system, by biology. Didn't really necessarily think I wanted to become a doctor, you know, and thinking, well, how can I do this? And then I discovered bioengineering as a discipline. This was a way to combine, you know, the essential principles of engineering, but to apply it to the human system. And I thought, this is fantastic. Sort of a burgeoning area. You know, this is in the mid 80s. And so I headed off to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia to get my degree in bioengineering. I thrived at Penn in Philadelphia. And it was great because the undergraduate program had you were in the bioengineering department, but you had an emphasis area. So for me, that emphasis area was mechanical. You know, you could choose materials, you could choose electrical, sort of a grounding in that core engineering discipline, that traditional discipline. So I came out of the University of Pennsylvania with that degree in bioengineering, and I thought, okay, you know, now what's next? Never dreamed I'd be getting a Ph.D. I think one of our women on the video said the same thing. You know, why would I want to do that? You know, I don't want to be a professor. I didn't think, you know, I thought that's why you went and got a Ph.D. You know, because you wanted to go into academia. So but I did want to do some graduate work. I thought that would set me up well, you know, for the career that I was looking for. 2-year investment, that sounds good. So I was applying to programs, and I was very fortunate to get into the mechanical engineering department at MIT. And I had written in my personal statement how I wanted to do research in the area of biomechanics. And I was becoming very interested specifically in injury, you know, how the body fails, how injuries occur to tissues under complicated stresses and things like that. And so I wrote about this in my personal statement. And the mechanical engineering department ended up forwarding my application to a Ph.D. program in medical engineering and medical physics. And they reached out to me and they said, you know, based on what you're expressing interest in, we think that you would really be a good candidate for this program. And I started thinking, now this I could do for another 5 or 6 years. You know, this was starting to inspire me in terms of, you know, wanting to make that 5 or 6 or 7 year commitment to doing research, you know, in bioengineering. And so, you know, this was a program that was focused on the training of engineers who could operate right at that interface of engineering and medicine. So it involved not only everything you would have to do to get a PhD in engineering, including, little aside here, including passing the doctoral qualifying examinations in mechanical engineering at MIT. And I remember, I think it was Sam on the video mentioned the word imposter. My very first real exposure to imposter syndrome was when I took those doctoral qualifying exams at MIT. I have never had less confidence in my abilities than when I was standing up in front of that room full of professors, just feeling like I was blowing it. I actually ended up doing just fine and passing. But it was an interesting experience. And maybe you all have had that experience in some point in your lives. I still get it all the time. That feeling that you're just there because of luck. It's not really your accomplishments. Should I have this idea that I think is good, but I'm not sure if I should say anything, and should I speak up, and all of that. You're not alone is my message to you. But the important thing is to make sure you don't let it keep you from speaking up, because you do belong and your ideas are valuable. But I've been there, and you're not the only one. So I went on and thought, wow, I really do want to be part of this program. And so I did get my master's in mechanical engineering along the way. I did my master's research at the Newman Laboratory for Biomechanics and Human Rehabilitation at MIT. That figure there is an MRI image of a knee joint. I was very interested in the mechanical load transmission in the knee joint. Specifically, there's a cartilage called the meniscus and how loads are transmitted through there. I did a lot of finite element modeling. This is back when, I think the models that I needed a Cray supercomputer to run, I could probably run on my phone right now. So this was a long time ago. And then when I moved on to a new lab, after I finished my master's, I moved on to the orthopedic biomechanics laboratory at the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, which is one of the Harvard Medical School teaching hospitals. Because this program that I was in addition to doing all of that coursework, passing the doctoral qualifying exams at MIT in mechanical engineering, we then had to do about the first year to year and a half of med school, essentially, right alongside the students at Harvard Med School. So the anatomy course, the physiology courses, even some of the clinical rotations, the early clinical rotations in the hospital, to really understand that environment. Because like I said, they're training engineers to really operate at that interface of engineering and medicine. So this was truly unique and one of the things that really attracted me to this. And so when I went to sort of figure out what my PhD research was going to be, I continued along this theme of, sort of bone and joint or orthopedic biomechanics, and became very interested in bone fracture. And that image on the right-hand side is an image of a hip fracture. And this is a very prevalent problem among the elderly. And what we were doing in that laboratory was using the principles of mechanics and failure analysis to understand the things that create risk. How do you minimize risk of fracture, whether that's due to mechanics or preventive interventions with falling or therapeutic agents like drugs that can alter bone density or bone architecture. So I did more modeling work, more experimental work for that PhD at that Beth Israel Hospital lab. And so, this was an incredible journey. I thrived. I really enjoyed living in Cambridge, but there I was. So now what? This is the question that many of you are, thinking that you're going to be facing soon or over the next couple of years. I go to a postdoc. That's pretty standard stuff. You go on to a faculty position, maybe from there. There were many of my peers that were taking this kind of path, not surprising. I'm sure that a lot of you are probably considering this path. I even had applied for a postdoc. We'd gotten funding. It was going to be in Switzerland at the University of Bern. Oh, that sounds exotic. Won't that be great? But just wasn't that. I wasn't that excited about it. This just wasn't what I wanted. Medical school. Many of my peers, because of all the required work to get to the PhD, it's really only another 2 years to get the MD. but I only wanted to do that if I was going to treat patients. And I really didn't want to go into clinical medicine. So, that one wasn't working. An industry position. I had actually had a summer job while I was an undergrad working at an orthopedic implant manufacturer, which was great experience. But, again, I just didn't really feel like the product development side was right for me. And so then I went to the career fair at MIT, and I listened to a talk by an executive from a company that at the time was called Failure Analysis Associates. And they were doing a broad array of work that included injury biomechanics, looking at the mechanism of injuries in real world accidents. And I thought, now we're talking. This is something very applied. It's directly relevant. My experience on both the medical side as well as the engineering side would be incredibly relevant. And I thought, this is going to work for me. So my professional journey begins. This is 1996. I packed my bags. I had just finished up in Cambridge, put most of my stuff in storage. I had been hired to actually go to the company's Philadelphia office, which was really just getting off the ground. But the corporate headquarters was in Menlo Park, California. And so we decided that because the Philadelphia office was so new, that it would be a really good job for me to spend about 6 months at the corporate headquarters. I call it my corporate indoctrination period. You're going to be at the mothership for about 6 months. You're going to meet your colleagues, learn how the company works, do a bunch of training and all of that. And so I put my things in storage, couple suitcases, packed my bags, went to Menlo Park. And then about 6 months later, I'd had my training. I was ready to go to Philadelphia. Very shortly thereafter, the name of the company changed. So it changed from Failure Analysis Associates to Exponent, which remains the name today. And the reason for the name change really was because of the evolution of the company's portfolio of work that we do. We had started as a company that analyzed failures, completely reactive. Something has happened, an airplane crash, an explosion at an oil field, automotive accident, what have you, using engineering principles to really understand the root causes of those failures. This is how the company grew over many decades into broader and broader disciplines. But over time, the company was now engaged in health and environmental consulting and more proactive types of work. So the name Failure Analysis Associates really didn't reflect the full breadth of the consulting work that the company does. So in 1998, we changed our name to Exponent. But the fact that I took the post in Philadelphia really was a tipping point for me. And it's something I want to, I really pause to reflect on and want to share with you, because it's about taking a little bit of a risk. It's about taking the stretch assignment, because I wasn't going to stay with the sort of stable group at the corporate headquarters. It was well established. I was going to be out at the Rebel Outpost, the frontier. This brand new office, something to grow, and I saw opportunity in that, because I was going to be able to have an opportunity to work directly with clients and really be out front and to be able to have an impact on this relatively new venture that we had in the company. And so I said, great. And I also was from New Jersey, so I was going to be near family. I mean, there were just many things that worked well with regard to that. So off I went, and I do want to share a little bit about the company. This isn't a pitch for Exponent, but it helps if I'm going to describe my career path. I think it helps to just be basically grounded in what the company does. It's hard to describe us in one sentence, but I like this one. We harness the power of scientific excellence, objectivity, and disciplinary diversity to both understand past failures and also to unravel the complexities of innovations as they become reality. We have over 900 consultants around the world. You can see almost 3/4 of those consultants have doctoral degrees in their chosen field. We have about 90% of our consultants in the United States and about 10% in the UK, the EU, and in Asia. And we work across a variety of technical disciplines to solve some of the most important issues for clients across industries related to their products, related to their processes. We work across consumer products, utilities, life sciences, transportation, oil and gas. The list goes on. And we're able to form an interdisciplinary project team seamlessly, pulling from all of these different technical disciplines to work with a client to solve whatever their issue is, whether something has failed in the past or whether they're looking to chart a course for the future. Our vision. One of the most important elements of leadership is about making sure that the folks you're leading are inspired by, what does your organization aspire to? weSTEM has a fantastic motto or tagline or whatever you call it. You have a common thread about what it is that you're doing and where you're going and what your aspiration is. At Exponent, we engage the brightest scientists and engineers to empower clients with solutions for a safe, healthy, sustainable, and technologically complex world. These are the things that drive the business that we do. Society's expectations around safety, health, and the environment are always, that bar is constantly being raised. I like to use the example of the automated vehicle a couple of years ago in Tempe, Arizona. There was a fatality with a pedestrian. I'm sure you all heard it on the news. There are 4,999 other pedestrians that get killed by human drivers every year, and it doesn't make the headlines. That's because our society's expectations of safety of that automated vehicle are orders of magnitude higher than the expectations we even have of our own selves as drivers, right? So this increasing complexity and the increasing expectation means that clients need a lot of help. And so that's what Exponent is there to do. So a little timeline of the path. I'm a lifer at Exponent. I've never changed companies. I think that's unusual. I came in as an associate. So this is at the bottom, of our technical path. And I come in with this expertise in bone mechanics and bone fracture. And so I was a sponge. It's about learning. It was reading literature, trying to, learning the various tools that we had for analyzing and things like that. Getting exposure to projects, very on-the-job training. I was shocked to learn when I started that there was a client who was going to pay $125 every hour that I worked on their project. Oh my gosh, now it's like auto mechanics now get 150, but back then that sounded like a lot. Just learning how to provide excellent work product, working on a wide variety of projects with various leaders in the company, learning about our quality assurance procedures, just a lot of learning in those early years. Very quickly promoted to a senior associate. So now I'm getting increased exposure to clients. I'm in client meetings. I'm able to present some of the work, starting to sort of market externally to that client base. Publishing and professional development opportunities, incredibly important. Making those investments in your future, especially as a consultant. You need to have a foundation. Your CV is an incredibly important part of the business that you're able to develop. So you need to continue to invest in that. So publishing, we have mentoring programs and things like that. And starting to identify a niche area of expertise. This little graphic I have it almost looks like a toy, but this was a rather sophisticated computer simulation that we used to use to look at kinematics of occupants, whether it was automotive. In this case, it's on a forklift. But again, back then, this would probably run on my phone faster than it ran for me on a supercomputer back then. So in a few years, I was promoted to manager, and this is a tipping point as well. This is where you're no longer being fed with work that is being brought into the company by others. This is where you are actually out in the marketplace and clients are starting to call you for your advice and for your analysis to work on their matter. So a very important sort of shift where we're developing clients and really out there, starting to mentor and supervise junior staff, starting to hire junior staff, really being responsible for forming that larger team and mentoring them. Generating work for myself and starting to generate work for others. You know, in a professional services setting, mouths need to be fed. People need work to do. The billable hour is very important to the running of the business. And so quickly after that, I was promoted to senior manager. You know, I'm continuing to hone my niche area of expertise. I had developed a reputation for being very good at analyzing simulations and understanding, you know, these are simulations that might be put forward by experts who are working on the other side of a litigation case. I was very, you know, the clients are looking at this input file and they have no idea whether it's, you know, you've heard garbage in, garbage out. We all understand what that is. Well, I was able to figure that out. Believe it or not, I saw a simulation once where the so-called expert on the other side had turned gravity off. I kid you not. He turned gravity off in the simulation just for a moment to make someone, you know, be ejected from the vehicle. And boy, was that a fun cross-examination. So the client was thrilled. And so there are interesting little things that you can develop. But I was starting to develop clients and then became a principal in the firm where you're really a recognized expert, you know, nationally in injury biomechanics. And I really had developed a specialty in automotive injury biomechanics. And so I was doing a lot of work with the automotive industry, understanding when they had crashes with their vehicles, exactly how did the injuries occur? What were the implications of some of the designs of their safety systems, whether that was the airbag, whether that was the seatbelt system. You know, when questions arose as to the performance of those systems, what if this, what if we had designed it like that? What would have happened from the standpoint of the injury? So it was very impactful work. I spent a lot of time crawling around direct cars, like I have pictured here, looking for physical evidence, understanding the specifics of the markings on the seatbelt. How does that relate to the medical information and the imaging? So this was how I was still bringing the engineering and the medicine all together. And there was once I got to be a principal, there were opportunities that came across to me to take on a role as a director. You know, directors at our company, whether a director of a technical practice or a director of an office. And I said no. I was so laser focused on the consulting elements of my career. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the world famous, you know, injury biomechanics expert. And I didn't want to be distracted with sort of a more business side operational role. So I resisted that for a number of years and just continued to grow my success on the technical side with the clients. But in 2005, I had an opportunity to join what was called our firm's development committee and be appointed as a corporate vice president. And this was my first opportunity to really broaden beyond my area of expertise and contribute to the forward-looking strategy of the company. What kinds of things are we going to be doing 5 years from now? How is the company going to position itself, either through research or through thought leadership, to capture those issues that are going to be at the forefront of our clients' minds, you know, in 5 years or 8 years or what have you? And I started to really see the bigger picture. And so being in that room had a real impact on me in terms of the way I thought about the impact that I was having on the organization. And then in 2012, I remember it well, our CEO at the time, Paul Johnston, pulled me aside at one of our principals meetings. And I had been resisting these director roles for many years. And he said, Catherine, look, he had an organizational need. He needed a new group vice president for his transportation group. And he said, look, you are the obvious choice. I had never been a practice director. Usually the path would have been to take a director role and then the group vice president role. I had skipped a step entirely, but he was inspiring. And I had started to realize through my role as a corporate vice president that I could have a bigger impact on the organization. And so I took on this role. I still spent 80% of my time in consulting, but that other 20%, or I should say maybe that other 50%, because it definitely added up to more than 100, as it often will for all of you. Then I really started to learn about the operational aspects of the business. How it is that we think about our growth and our strategy and the bottom line and how you manage all of those sorts of things. And this was really eye-opening to me, to be in that position of leadership, trying to inspire the development of the next generation, thinking about the recruiting of that talent, thinking about the performance management of that. And so over time, I realize now when I had that conversation with Paul that he had a lot of things in mind for me that he didn't tell me about in that meeting. He was starting a process and he was grooming me eventually to take on being president of the company, which happened in 2016. This is where I had to leave my consulting behind. So I had spent all this time, 20 years, laser focused on the development of my technical reputation, my skill set. I was wildly successful as a consultant. And now I was going to be leaving that behind because you can't do both. It's a full-time job running a public company. But I was excited. I was ready for that. And so I packed my bags once again, moved from my family. My husband retired. My family with 2 kids, we went back to California. And then in 2018, I also took on the chief executive officer role as well. And so, now I still have a handful of matters, technical consulting matters that are still alive. Litigation, I've often served as an expert in litigation, and those things can have a very long tail on them. So I have a few, but definitely spending all of my time in the executive role, and it's been an extraordinary learning curve for me. I don't have an MBA. I think I took a basic finance course when I was an undergrad to fulfill some requirement. That was it. I remember the funniest thing about it was when the professor said, "Okay, everybody relax. I'm going to take a derivative." And I was like, what is the big deal? Everyone's like, whoa, I must have been the only engineer in the class. Like that's just the slope of the line. But I had an incredible set of mentors, and the board of directors felt very strongly that the leader of this company needed to come from the consulting ranks. There are a number of professional services organizations that are considered our peers by our investors. They're not all scientific and engineering firms, but they take sometimes different approaches to leadership. They might just think you've got to have sort of a finance person, in that lead role or whatever. But in our business, it's a partnership. Even though we're a public company, our cohort of principals, we have 160 roughly principals in our organization. And they are my partners, and I am like the executive managing partner of that partnership. And so having someone in that leadership role who has been in the trenches, who knows what it's like to come up in the ranks, develop business, be out with clients, have all of those issues, that has informed every decision that I make with regard to the company. That perspective and that credibility, that street cred I have with our consultants really, really makes a difference. So I was trying to think of an analogy for sort of the ups and downs of the career path in life. And I thought, you know what, it looks like a stock chart. And so indulge me here, if you will. I just grabbed the data for the last 30 days or so history for our stock. We trade on the NASDAQ. And it's not so great, right? It's going in the wrong direction. This is my job. But then you kind of pull out. So this is 1 year. Lots of sort of hills and valleys. You kind of have a surge and then it kind of comes back down. But you get a different perspective when you start to zoom out a little bit. And then you zoom out again. And you start to say, oh, that's better. But look at the ups and downs, right? I mean, you can have a plan, your life is going to go like this, or, you pick your slope, pick your direction, and you think, okay, I'm on my way, here I go. It doesn't work that way, right? There are things that you control in the ups and downs, but there are a lot of things you don't control in the ups and downs. That's drop over the last 30 days. I mean, the NASDAQ had a major correction over the last couple of months, right? We're swinging with the market, and I may be working harder than I ever have and doing all the right things, but there are still these other issues, right? But the advice here is really about sticking with it, right? It's the long term. It's going to go up and it's going to go down due to things you do, due to things that are totally beyond your control. But the important thing is that you are thinking about, how do I invest in my future? Because sometimes you have to not optimize for the return in the moment. You have to think about, what am I doing right now? How am I allocating my time and effort relative to the future in the long term? If it were just about optimizing profits for the company in the short term, I would be managing it very differently. So yeah, we just announced our earnings a couple of weeks ago. Every quarter we announce our earnings, and we have to give guidance to the marketplace for the full year. I have to get my crystal ball out, try to figure out what's going to happen. We have lots of different ways we do that. And we had our profits in 2021 were shot way up because of the pandemic. Our consultants aren't traveling as much, lower costs. We had higher turnover, the great reshuffling. So we had fewer people and incredible client demand. So people were incredibly busy. I mean, we had really incredible profits. So they're going to fall back to normal next year. But the market's like, well, what do you mean? Like, this is our new expectation of your profit margins, right? But we've got to invest in the business, in the future of the business, in the development of the team, in the various things that we're doing to expand our reputation. And that's going to take away from the profits in the near term, but boy, is it going to propel us in the future. So our long-term investors know that, and they're going to stick with us. And the ones that have stuck with us on this journey, you see it goes up and down, but boy, they're getting the payoff for their investment. And it's a lot like life. It was decisions I had to make as well. I had to make decisions. Well, I could bill some more hours, and I'd probably get a bigger bonus at the end of the year. But you know what? I really need to write this paper because I need to build my resume if I really want to get to principal someday. So you're always going to see those trade-offs. So a few thoughts on leadership. I talked about this issue of sort of vision. I shared my company's vision with you. Leadership is about inspiring people through the use of a common vision, mission, and purpose. If you can get folks inspired and all heading in the right direction with that vision, that's incredibly important. The commitment to core values, as I was leading through the pandemic, and when I started making these weekly videos to try to reassure our employees on what was happening, and there's so much uncertainty, and I'm not even knowing what to say. And I just went back to the company's core values. And I talked about the importance of what we do for our clients: scientific excellence, objectivity, lifelong learning, all of the things that we value in terms of our mission and our vision. Being authentic and not being afraid to be vulnerable are things that I think characterize really, really powerful leaders. Being able to balance risks. You've got to take some risks. If you're not making a mistake, if you're not tripping up once in a while, you're probably not taking enough risk. You don't take too much. Don't get me wrong. Learning from failure. There's no better teacher than doing something wrong. It'll have an impact on you, and you will be better for it, if you can look at it that way. And being a good communicator. You just can't communicate enough, and then communicate again, and then say it again, and find another channel, and listen also to the communication that's coming back to you through many channels. So a few things in closing. Best career advice I ever got is right there. Speak up. You will spend far more time regretting the times you didn't speak up than regretting the times you did. Be ready. About 3 months into my job, I was still an associate. I got a call from our most senior technical person. I was frantically taking notes. It was probably a 15-minute conversation. He needed to go see a client. It was a Monday. We were going down to the client on Friday. And he gave me more work to do in that 4 days than I ever could have imagined. I was so green too. I was in the job 3 months. I went across the hall to my boss. I said, help me, I don't know what to do. He just called, I've been expecting this call. He showed me how to build the team, get it done, pull together the presentation. I flew down to meet him in Southern California the night before the meeting. And we go through everything. He said, great, you're giving the talk tomorrow. Okay, I'm giving the talk. And I got up there and I gave the presentation. He added a little color commentary, just knocked it out of the park. I remember meeting that client maybe 15 years later. He said, I remember that time that you came down and you gave us that presentation. That was really great. It stuck with him. So be ready for that moment. Feedback is a gift. It can often be very hard to take, but ask for it often and be generous with it and pay it forward. I was so fortunate when I showed you the picture of me on the lawnmower, to have an upbringing where I had the right influences and high expectations set for me. And, we all come from different backgrounds, but this is one way I feel like I can pay it forward by sharing my experience with all of you. And I encourage you all to find opportunities to share, all of the good things that you've been able to glean from your experience here in STEM with the generation that's coming after you. And with that, I'll close. I don't know, I may have talked too long. Do we have time for a question?
So yeah, we have
Okay.
time for questions. So thank you, Karen, or Catherine. Oh my God.
That's fine.
Too many names in my head right now. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome.
We will have time for questions now. There's a mic there, so if you feel comfortable, you can go up to the mic and ask questions. If not, we can have someone run around and you can have your hand up. So we have time for about 5 to 7 minutes of questions, and then we will head to session 1. And then if there are questions on Zoom, just let us know. But there.
Oh, don't worry about it. Is it on?
Switch it on.
Speak up. That was my advice. Let's see how she does.
My question is, in the face of challenges, have you found that you trade-offs with vision, or when do you think it's time to maybe redefine your vision? Have you had to deal with that?
Do you mean sort of my personal vision or sort of more at the company level? Were you thinking?
Yeah, either or.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, there certainly have been times in my life where I had to not necessarily change my vision of what I was doing, but I mean, I never originally saw myself in a CEO role. So I suppose I did really change my vision when, I had been laser focused on the technical side and decided to make that switch. But there was a time in my life when I had to very much sort of take a step back and recalibrate a bit because of things that had happened in my personal life. I had 2 young children. My son was 2 and my daughter was 6 months old, and my husband was diagnosed with ALS. And so that was a bit of one of those external events that you have no control over that can really, really provide kind of an extraordinary force in your life. And so, had to find a way to balance the needs of, being a caregiver and my career, taking care of the little ones, and all of that. And so, that on my sort of stock chart of life, that was a time when it was probably shortly after, that was 2009. When my husband ultimately passed away. So it's about a 4-year period. And then I was a single mom and, had to recalibrate all of those sort of work-life challenges associated with that. But it's never, I guess what I would say to all of that, when you think about work-life balance, everyone always uses that phrase. You're never going to have balance. You have to calibrate your expectation in the right way. I like the phrase managed disequilibrium. And I did not make that up. There's a great book called How Remarkable Women Lead. And the authors of that book came up with this phrase, at least that's where I first saw it. You're never in equilibrium. And you all understand equilibrium, you're scientists and engineers. It's always kind of unstable, but you manage it, right? And so, those things are going to come. But it's okay to kind of take a step back, get off the treadmill. You might have to make some short-term sacrifices. Maybe you're going to make less money for a little while you take a different path, but you're going to get back on there and you're going to find your way. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
I sort of wandered off there a little bit.